She was the outspoken and unapologetic Real Housewife of New York City who shook up season 13. Eboni K. Williams is not afraid to share her truth, and she's doing even more of that in her new book, Bet on Black: The Good News About Being Black in America Today. Eboni joins us today to discuss the recent release and more. This is Advocate Now. Well, Eboni, you recently released your book, Bet on Black. Tell me about the book and why you decided that now was the right time to write it and release it.
Yes, Sonia, this really felt like an opportunity in this moment in America's culture and landscape to write a book that celebrates Blackness in a way that I have not really seen enough of. Certainly in the racial climates and the cultural climates that we find ourselves in today, with various marginalized groups feeling unseen, unheard, frankly, unsafe and unprotected. I thought it was really an opportunity to frame what Blackness has meant for me growing up as a Black woman in America, born in the American South and raised there, and able to really more accurately understand what Blackness has meant for me and how it shows up in my liberation and in my experience, and frankly, in my opportunities to live an incredible first-class American life. And I don't think that that's a story we hear about a lot. I think often we hear stories that frame Blackness only around the trauma, only around the devastation. And so this book, Bet on Black: The Good News About Being Black in America Today, is to tell a more complete story.
Yeah, and the book really is a blueprint for how people can take control of their own lives and become a main character over what you've called the Black sidekick. So where would you say that initial shift begins?
I love that you call it a blueprint. That's certainly the intention in which I wrote this book, for Black Americans to be able to be very, first of all, accurate in their understanding of their own Blackness, and not simply find themselves subject to false and arbitrary narrative that has been force fed to most all of us, regardless of color, race, and identity. So it starts in the mind, to directly answer your question of the individual Black person, and then to be able to just be strategic for their own selves and personal choices around how they center their Blackness, how they reject notions of Black sidekick, if indeed that is something that they choose to do. So this is very much about liberation and personal choice within the psyche and the intention of the individual Black American consuming this.
The real you truly shines through in this book. You know, you're unapologetic, you're bold, you're in tune with yourself. How did you personally get there? Or have you always been that way, would you say?
It's very difficult, no matter your identity. I happen to be centering Blackness in this book, but as women, as queer identity individuals, as people with maybe particular disabilities or ableism, anything that is outside of a historic white hetero male normative creates challenge in terms of taking up space, centeredness, and confidence. So what I've been able to do, thankfully, to the mother that I write about ad nauseum in the book, my mother Gloria, who made it her business to know, I'm raising a young Black girl named Eboni in the American South, and I have to position and prepare her for how to have everything she wants out of this life, even though the world might not create an environment where she thinks she is deserving. So that work started at home at as early as 4 or 5 years old, reading actual content from everything from the narratives of Frederick Douglass, the autobiography of Malcolm X, to works by Bell Hooks and Phyllis Wheatley. So just being ingrained and understanding that from a very adolescent space, to then it showing up in workplaces, academics, and eventually, I sit here now at almost 40 in a place of true and complete confidence and knowingness, really, Sonia, about who and whose I am.
Well, you were a Real Housewife of New York City, and similar to the book, you were unapologetic, you were unafraid to share your truth. Not all of the women were receptive to that. Did you know that might be a possibility going into filming, or were you sort of caught off guard?
I was not caught off guard. I had watched the show from inception, so I was certainly aware of what I thought would be some limitations around how much space I take up generally. As just who I am, as a professional woman, as a woman who's a touch younger than most of my castmates, and just a strong personality. Adding race to it, and the fact that I was the first Black woman to join this particular group of women, I knew would complicate it a bit. What I did not necessarily anticipate as well was just how hostile potentially the environment would get between my castmates and myself, and the consequences in which we all ultimately shared around that tension.
I didn't like Luann making a false equivalency between people's education.
No. What
you said.
I need another tequila. I need a big tequila right
Why
now.
are you so angry? You're an angry woman right now.
Well, you even had a Harlem dinner night celebrating the history of Harlem. Why do you think some of the women were so resistant and found discomfort in that?
So some people, Sonia, I think, do a really nice job of holding space for experiences outside of their own centeredness. And some people do not. And I think some of my castmates had a very difficult time with that notion generally. So when they come to a Harlem night that celebrates Josephine Baker and Langston Hughes and Baldwin, and even though it was 5 courses with crab bisque and champagne and specialty cocktails and music and all the trappings of a traditional housewife, fantastic dinner party and fresh florals and all this jazz, literally, there was hostility because it wasn't about them, their culture, and their experience.
Yeah, and I think that is such a great example of being a microcosm of what's going on for so many people throughout the world. Do you have any advice on how they can continue to celebrate who they are, regardless of any backlash that they might receive in doing so?
Anticipate the backlash, which is why I'm very happy we're having this conversation. When you choose to decenter someone else's experience and expectation of that experience, right? Know that that's going to be met with some level of pushback, likely. That's just the world in which we live in. So having some level of preparation for it, making sure that you surround yourself with other people that support you in your work, people that look like you and people that don't, because there is a broader community outside of just your own siloed identity that does believe in the value of diversity and shared experiences. So I'm very blessed to have a community of people around me that are Black, white, Asian, Hispanic, Indigenous, and Latino, and also queer, straight, non-binary, and men and women and all the things. So therefore, I am prepared to stand 10 toes down, as the young people say, for my principles and what I believe in, because, Sonia, I believe in our interconnected humanity. I really, truly do.
I completely agree. Now, you also have a new court series coming up. It's called Equal Justice with Judge Eboni K. Williams. You have a law background. You're an attorney, but have you always been interested in becoming a judge?
Yes and no. So when you start practicing law, no matter at what stage of life, that is a very common pathway. Maybe you started as a prosecutor, a defense lawyer, or maybe you started a big litigation corporate firm like I did. And then eventually you earn your stripes, and part of the elevation of the career journey of attorneys is to eventually maybe be a judge. So in that respect, yes, that there's always some aspirational element to being on that bench and holding court, as we say, as a judge in your own courtroom. The TV judge thing is nothing that I really fantasized about or aspired to until the great Byron Allen presented the opportunity right in front of my lap. And it was too good to pass up. I, just like so many of us, grew up watching the People's Court with my grandma on days I was home from school. And, it really is our original reality TV, right? People kind of don't know in this generation. People's Court has been around over, I want to say since the 70s, maybe even before. So it's a longstanding genre. It is something that, has broader relevancy, newer, fresher relevancy in the era of Judge Judy, the grand dame of television court. And now I think there's an opportunity to reinvent that yet again. So I'm very excited about Equal Justice with Judge Eboni K. Williams to give this moment, this culture, this generation, its very own take and spice and freshness when it comes to daytime television court.
I'm Sonia Baghdady. Thanks for watching and advocating. For more stories and content like this, visit advocate.com and advocatechannel.com.